Hey, hello and welcome to today's session. Um, I think this will be a rather short session compared to the sessions I did before. So today I just want to wrap some things up here for this environment. There were a couple of things that we just didn't do the last time, and yeah, I also would like to work towards finishing at least this night shot up. So today we will talk about finishing up a couple of things here in the scene, like the light placement and some finer tweaks. And we're gonna have a look at color grading. So I'm gonna explain a couple of things there, and like just how I tackle these things and the way I see them. So we're doing a grade for this scene. And when we're done with this setup, the next videos then they will talk about the daylight setting that Sarah Lee also has. And I think we're gonna look at that setting with static lighting instead of dynamic lighting. So just we can, so I can talk about a few issues that might pop up in terms of how you use static lighting with lush vegetation and things like that, because it's a little bit more tricky. It's a lot more straightforward if you're just doing like a dark cave or like some underground stuff or building interiors or things like that with static lighting. But if you actually have a scene including nature assets, it becomes a little bit more tricky, and you have to be a little bit more creative in the way you think about how you solve your problems and how you still like make things look good. So that's up for the next sessions. So today I want to finish this one up. One thing that I want to say is big thanks to all of you guys so far, because there has been quite some great support from you for this little project. So people seem happy with it. That makes me obviously very happy as well. We can see here in the Epic launcher, I just got featured by Epic on their live stream as well. So big thanks to Epic. That's pretty awesome actually. So yeah, makes me really happy that this is being so well received. So let's continue to do some great stuff and have fun, I would say. All right. So the last time we started adding some custom highlight effects and things like this. We did that with using channels on our lights. So if I take this light and I get my details panel over and I search for channel, you can see like this light is affecting channel 0 and no other channels. If I check the mech, we can see the mech has channel 1 affected and not channel 0, which is actually stupid. I mentioned this in the last video that I forgot to set it up properly. We obviously want to have channel 1 as well, and now we can see we get rid of this dark spot here, because the problem is our skylight comes from channel 1, from channel 0. So what we want to do with these like fake fill lights is we want to have them on channel 1 and the robot has to be in channel 0 and 1. And so if the light is only on channel 1, it only affects the robot and not the environment, and that's what we wanted to do. And since I forgot to have channel 0 still activated, the robot didn't get any skylight, and that's the reason why it was so dark. So that's one thing that we could fix here. If we just look through this, yeah, this looks a lot more balanced. This one is not working so well because it's not tweaked really. I'm not really happy with this light over here, because I think like having something here is pretty cool, but I'm not so happy with the way it looks, because it doesn't make too much sense. If we just look at this here, there's this hole here in the trees where we can see the sky. So I think it actually makes a lot more sense if we can kind of like make it so that it feels like it's a light coming actually from back there. So let me just attach this window back in here. So, and we get rid of this one. And we choose a better color. Not yet sure if I want a warm or a cold color, but I think I will tend more towards a cold color. Yeah. Okay. Something like this. I reduce the intensity just a tiny little bit. And what I'm also going to do is, just for the sake of trying it out, I'm going to activate channel 1 for the house as well. And what I'm going to do is going to alt drag that light, go back to this perspective, and I will just like fool around a little bit and see if I can add a little bit of highlighting to this building as well. Oops. So we can just see that because we have all shadowing back here, it's not really giving a lot of like emphasis on the actual shapes of the building. So if we just look at this and we say like effect world here, you can see that the this chimney actually becomes a lot more defined, so to say. And for scenes like this, I actually really like doing things like this, and just helping to give some more shape and depth to the objects. That's actually the only reason you would ever use fake lighting, because I mean in the real world you would get all that stuff automatically somehow, but then again it's like they do it with films. Sometimes you want to have more focus or more depth on certain things. You want to make just increase the cinematic feel and the feel of definition, and that's why you start using fake lights to make these things happen. Another thing that we could also try is if I duplicate this one again, because depending on where which shot we are at, these this stack of chopped wood here also doesn't really nicely, you know, it doesn't really pop. I mean, it should not pop, so it should not take focus, but it should be understandable what it is. And I think we can maybe fix that if we get in our fake lights for this stuff as well, just to help it a little bit. Whoops. As you can see here, we're taking these together. So, obviously now that light is way too strong, and that's not too bad. We can fix all of that. Kind of like this. So now we go into this perspective again. What we're trying to do is really, we're just like trying to give it a little bit of a nice highlight from one side. And when we're happy with this kind of position, we can see we just highlighted these edges here a little bit more. We should use a more, let's say, a more ambient kind of color, so it feels more like it's some environment shadow blue bounce light coming from there. Okay, soften that down a little bit. And what we can also do is just to give it a little bit more directionality from the warm light coming from the house. We will kind of like do the same thing here again, but we will choose a warmer light. And kind of like this. Now we just increase the intensity a little bit. So yeah, it's not perfect, but I think it just helps to boost some of these elements here a little bit. I also think that we should boost this one a little bit. Okay. And then something really important when we look again at all these references. I mean, I think I said it the last time, it's a little bit hard to really nail those now because they're all like having snow and we don't have snow. So it's a little bit tricky to actually get this one-to-one. But when we look at all these pictures, what we can see is they're all very, very clear. So there is not a lot of like fog and atmospherics going on. They're almost like, you know, when you have this crystal clear air and it's like winter. They're all kind of like that. So that is one thing that when we look at our scene here, and it doesn't really matter at which shot we look, but they're all very, very foggy. And it's a little bit tricky to get to that look if we are that foggy. So what we can try is we can just go into the exponential height fog. And so this fog right now, it's really, really dense. If we just look at this value and I just click this yellow arrow here, so that is the default. It's 0.02, and even if I put it completely to the right, we're at 0.05, and what we had was 0.15, which is this. I think this really helps to establish the mood, but I also think it's a tiny bit too much. So what we can do is, if we actually like the way the fog works, we can try, maybe that fixes it, to just move the fog actor down. Can you see what's happening here? This is just the position. It's not me adjusting anything of the fog itself. So we started with this, and I think what we should do is something like this. Just get rid of a little bit of that super intense fog. The thing is, if we go in the settings here, we can say allow translucent selection. That makes it easier for us to now again select, for example, these planes here that have these effects. There are quite some of them, as we can see here. And I actually don't know why we have this plane here. I really like that approach. I mean, there's one problem. If you would have this as a game, you should have these as particles and not like this, because if people start crouching, that stuff happens, and you don't want that. So it would be better to have like some particle clouds, but for this is perfectly alright. However, I think it might be a little bit too much. So what we can do is we can just quickly have a look, because I don't know how that fog sheet was built. And okay, so that's also not really that good. I just thought I was building the distance fields. That means the fog sheet mesh probably has distance fields activated, which we don't really want. Okay, so now you can see me struggling a tiny little bit, because I am not a super huge blueprint master, and I basically don't use blueprints. I mean, I do use them for like lamps and stuff like that. So for example, having a mesh with some tweaking functionality, that's often stuff that I build. But other than that, I'm like the biggest noob when it comes to blueprints, because like when I was working at Jaeger, for example, that stuff was built by people. So I was just like, hey, I need this, can you build it? And then someone did it. So yeah, I know I have to learn more about this, so please forgive me. But luckily here we have some tweakables. So what we can do is we can go into the opacity and do something like this, which I think already helps quite a bit. I actually like the one here, because that gives us like a nice contrast and silhouette here. I will actually duplicate this one light here, and I will try to just light this up a little bit more. Yeah, I think this is better. Okay, so yeah, it makes it easier for us to do our work if we don't have everything too foggy, and we can also see that we actually see a lot more of the colors, because it does not get eaten away by the fog so much. What I also want to do is we need to have a look at the start distance. So if I'm still right with this, 250 units is 2.50 meters. So I think we should try to get rid of a little bit here, and I also want to have more red of this building visible. So I will just see right now what I get depending on how I tweak it. Yeah. So what we can see now actually, and that is pretty important. I'm gonna reduce this now back, because otherwise we're gonna have too much to tweak. So what we can see happening here is basically we get a desaturation on the image that makes stuff feel more flat, which in turn makes it look more like the stuff we see here. The problem though is, and that is something that I said in the beginning, is if we look at the base color, we have those super intense colors. So what is happening is, as soon as I start moving the fog backwards, we get those intense colors back. And now everything is just way too strong, and we actually will have like problems like this. So I think Sarah, she didn't maybe notice it while she was working on the scene because she had those high fog values. That's just an assumption, I don't know. But it kind of makes sense from my point of view to say like, well, okay, this looks kind of what I want, but actually the data doesn't look correct because if we do this, it's not what we want. So the correct way would actually be to fix the textures and then go in with like proper fog settings to make sure that it all blends well together. But this is out of scope for what we're doing now, so we're not going to do it. And yeah, so just as a side note. So now when we look into color grading, let's go into our post volume. There are a few things that are important. I think I also have to set my tone mapper again. Tone mapper film is 0 exactly. So we set this to 1. And there we get the crunch. So this looks better already. So one thing very important is there's basically two things when it comes to grading. There is color grading and color correction. And the difference is basically color correction is more needed, I would say, when you're doing movie stuff, because like color correction is you get source material and you do a color correction to get, a neutral base to build upon, and then you do a color grading after you established a neutral base. And that color grading gives it some sort of feel or character or stylization. So in video games, you should not, in a perfect world, have to color correct your stuff that much. Because if you start with a very, very good default base grade and some nice tone mapper settings, you basically already have a very, very good base to start from. So what we're going to look into now is the grading and not the correction. So the grading is just like making the image look fancy or giving it a certain style. I touched it a little bit last time when we talked about tone mapping. So we have a couple of in-engine tools here to do the color grading, and they're actually quite they're quite versatile, so you can actually do a lot with this. So you have all the important values. You have color grading highlights, midtones, shadows. You have gain and gamma and offset. So that is all very, very good. It's a step in the right direction. However, and I hope that someone from Epic watches this and just listens a little bit to my feedback. I think this is not very user-friendly at all. I would go as far as to say it's slightly shitty, actually, because you don't really get a feel for how to use that. It's very... it feels like programmer art, basically. It's like a programmer had this great idea, and it is a great idea, and then he was like, okay, so I give you all those values to tweak and stuff, but this is not really usable from an artist perspective. It's actually quite pain in the ass to work with this. So my feedback to Epic, I really love that you brought in this stuff. It's super great, but please make it more user-friendly. So that is actually a thing, like you can do all the stuff now in Engine, but I would prefer not to. I would prefer to still do a lookup texture color grading and to use Photoshop or Lightroom, because again, I don't think this is user friendly. I want to show a couple of things just to give a quick suggestion of what I think could be a good way of fixing this. But yeah, we will look into doing a lookup texture color grading. So first of all, where this stuff here comes from is from the movie industry. So the movie industry grades with different tools, and one of them is actually Davinci Resolve. It's a very professional color grading suite. The cool thing is you can actually download the software for free, because those guys, Blackmagic, they sell hardware. So as you can see, this guy here is sitting on a fancy grading table. So what they do is they sell those grading tables and displays together with the software, and that's where they make the money, and that's the reason why they release the software for free. So you can actually download this program for free, it's the full version, and you can start learning and trying professional color grading. And when we look at this stuff here, that's how the tool looks, right? And where was this other image? Here you can see this guy. He has these round, colorful circles here, these color wheels, and those waveform monitors. And those colored wheels, they are exactly these things here, but they are so much nicer to use and to tweak. And it's super important that you actually have those waveforms so you can see what you're doing. And I would strongly suggest to Epic to please integrate something like this. Just on a side note, I mean, I know this is the competition, but please have a look at this. This is from Unity, and it's their new post-processing component. And just look at this. They have the waveforms in here, just like you have in Resolve. Everything is like nicely slider based, and if we go down here, you get curves, and you get color wheels, and you get all these little nice sliders, and you get like some nice overviews about like what are you actually doing. So like this is my suggestion to Epic, like please make that stuff more user friendly, or, and that is a very important part of it, please allow a different type of lookup textures. And that brings me to the thing that we're actually gonna do now. So if you go into the Unreal docs, and then under post-processing, there's a color grading page here. And on this color grading page, you can download a lookup texture. And that's the way color grading works in Unreal if you're not using these filmic options here. It's basically, you have this lookup texture, so the one that we can see here, that's the neutral one. And then you take a screenshot from your game, and you do some color grading in Photoshop with adjustment layers, and then you just copy the adjustment layers to this clean file. So that's basically the clean output that the engine renders now. And then you apply the color grade to that file, and you can see in this texture here that it looks different from the other one. And then you get like these grades, and you can see that also in these example images here, like how strongly you can basically influence the colors with this. And this is a very easy approach of doing it, but I think it is outdated. I mean, we're now approaching HDR rendering and all those things, and it's like everything is just getting more elaborate, like more complex as well, but like the technology keeps pushing forward. We get more approaches that are coming over from the movie industry. And I just read about some HDR stuff that is now in the preview version for the new Unreal version, and where they basically implemented some HDR stuff. And I think that these lookup textures, I think that Epic should move to the next iteration, which is cube files, which is a proper 3D lookup table. I think it's better, it's more supported, and you have a lot more freedom. And that actually brings me to one thing. This tool here, it's a little bit pain in the ass if you want to work with those lookup textures here. However, what's really good is these tools, like others as well, like Nuke for example, they can output cube files. So I would actually really love for Epic to either go the way like Unity did and implement this stuff natively in the engine, because I think it's always better if you can do it in engine. You get more straight feedback on your stuff instantly of what you're doing, versus having another grading suite and then you have to go back and forth all the time. However, I think supporting cube file lookup textures is an easier thing to implement than to implement that stuff. So I think that could be really nice for Epic to implement the support for cube files, because then all people can use Davinci or Nuke or whatever, like really professional grading tools, and generate their own cube files and then just drop them in the engine and everything works like a charm. But it's not like that, so we're gonna stick with this. So you can just like right click and download this lookup texture, which is the clean lookup texture. And so I already just fooled around a little bit because I wanted to double check that stuff still works the way I imagine it. So here I have this lookup texture and it's the clean one. Let me just quickly bring this here over so you can see what I'm doing. And then I have this screenshot here, which I'm going to replace with a new screenshot. So we're gonna do full screen, we're gonna take our shot, and we're gonna take the high resolution screenshot, but I just take the multiplier of 1 and just gonna make a screenshot. It got saved here. Yeah, but which one is it? Let's do the details and the date. Okay, my computer is slow right now, sorry for that. So we can just close this down again. Yeah, so it must be that one. And we just open it in Photoshop. So as you can see, this is the updated shot already, so that's what we had before. After last session, this is what we have now. So we fixed the robot, we reduced some of the fog and made it more readable. We added some more highlights to some of the elements in the scene. As you can see, the little sci-fi bubble here was like, it was just almost only a silhouette. Now we can actually see something. We can see that it goes in here and that there are these tubes hanging out and stuff like that. So I think that's a better base already. So we can close this. So what I always like to do is I like to start with curves first. So we can just take our curves here and zoop. Yeah, sorry, that's the second screen thing. Okay, and so what I always like to do is I like to slightly grab the darks, you know, you can see that here, and I can do some crazy things here. So I tend to slightly grab the darks and take them over to something like this. And then the next thing is I try to grab the midtones as well and flatten them just out a tiny little, like try to raise them a little bit so we get this kind of like flatness here. We have to do it super subtle because we don't want to destroy the image too much, but we want to flatten out those values just slightly. And we also don't want to kill the sky. So, okay. Now we just look at what we get here. And we just always compare it. So I get rid of that stuff in the center for now. So I'm just going to use this to make the highlights brighter here. And I'm going to just, I want it very much down here. Okay. Alright. So now that we got this, I'll take a levels. And what I want to do is I want to slightly, really just super slightly, like this is always 1 here. I just want to slightly flatten it out a tiny little bit. As you can see, right? So I just give it back some of that range, but I still have the more contrasty shadows because of that tweak. So I popped the highlights a little bit, and I made the darks a little bit stronger, but then I tried to just bring in a little bit of that brightness back in the midtones. Okay, so those adjustment layers, they're very, very easy to use, and the good thing is we can just drag them over onto the Lookup Texture. What I also like to use a lot is the photo filter. So now we actually have this warming filter, and that actually looks fairly nice already, but we're going away from what we have with the images of Simon, because this now it looks like a late night afternoon, but we don't want that. So what we want to do is we actually want to use a cooling filter. And now comes the question for which style we actually want to go. So we can go towards more of this green cool thing. So let's up the density first, so we can actually strongly see what's happening here, right? So this color that I chose now, it would be more like this scene here, for example. This is more like a cold dark blue, this one as well. So we can really just decide what we kind of want to have now in terms of colors. So I think I will go for something like this. And then I'm going to reduce the density again. So you can see we just, if I turn it, this is off, this is on, this is off, this is on. We just push a little bit more of that stuff in. So now, when we look at this, here, so that's before, and that's after. Before, after, before, after. We can also, of course, try to do some more crazy stuff if we go into the channel mixer, for example. So this is just like I don't think that we will do this now. It's just more like for illustrative purpose. So we can do all sorts of crazy things here, right? So now we're in the midtones, and I actually really like this. So you can choose midtones, highlights, shadows. So we can actually like go in and really give some more bluish tint to some of these shadows here, kind of like this. And we can go into the midtones, and we can actually push the red to get some more of our colors slightly back here. So there's actually a couple of cool ways to fool around here. You can see how we get the red back in the evening sky and the glowing from the building. And also one cool thing is you notice like this is a pretty strong grade now, right? That's a very, very strong grade. And the cool thing is in Unreal, we can actually, if we just take this, let's take the color balance and do like 50%. Yeah, kind of like this. So what we can do is we have a color grade intensity for the lookup texture. So what we can actually like really say how strong we want that effect to be applied. I'm gonna add another curve levels here, and I'm just thinking if I should flatten this out a tiny little bit, but no, that's okay. So let's just go with this for now, and yeah. Yeah, I think this helps. So what we do now is we basically drag out this window so we can have the lookup table here visible at the same time. We select all our layers and we just drag them over. And now, if we look here, by the way, I'm doing this hiding thingy for the layers. If you alt-click on the eye of the layer you want to be the one that you see, it deactivates all the other layers. And you can see it's changing here. So that's what's going to happen to our values. So now what we can do is we just save it as a PNG. Yep. No compression. And going to make this a little bit bigger here. I don't remember where I imported my texture for the sky. Where was it? Yeah. Well, textures, sky, here it is, great. Okay, I'll just make a new folder and call it color grading. And I'm gonna import my grading test texture. So one thing that is super important, when you open up the texture, you can see it looks bad, very bad. And that is because of the compression. So we need to go, was it this one? Oh, nope. We need to change. Oh God, where was it? Texture group, world, color lookup table. Zack. And now you see the texture is fixed. So it's in the texture group setting. We save it. And I have it activated here, and then we can go over to color grading, can turn this on, and we click the arrow, PAM. So now here it is. And you can see it's the same as what we have here. It's exactly just doing this. And if we don't like the effect, or like there's this color grading intensity, so we can say how much of this effect we actually want. And this is actually something that I use a lot. So I always do my effects slightly stronger than I would normally want them, and then I basically decide later on how much I actually want of that effect. It's the same thing as for example, when I do some sculpt things, sometimes I do, mostly like rocks or things like that. So when I sculpt rocks and I sculpt surface detail or things like that, I try to sculpt that on like a separate layer, morph target or something like that. So I can basically just go in and chisel the shit out of that rock and get all those crazy bumpy details in, and then I reduce the intensity of that effect until I'm really happy with it. And I'll do the same thing when it comes to color grading as well. Mostly my color grading is always too strong, but that's basically how I set the look. I go a little bit more extreme, a little bit more poppy, And then when I have that sort of look that I kind of like, I decide like how much of that look do I actually want. So I think this is very strong, and 0.5 is actually a lot better. So if we just turn it on and off, we can see the nice little adjustments that we just made. Another thing here, what we can see on the house is that we don't get too much of that color from the house. And that is because, whoops, the lights don't have a big enough of a radius, I would say. So if we make this larger, you can see already that we get a lot more. Oops, sorry, haha, that was stupid. That was the intensity. Let's make this radius a bit larger and the intensity as well. So we just have to find like a nice way of doing it. Just drag this over a bit, because this is like, since we don't have any bounce light, we have to, yeah, fake this. And yeah, this is also quite good to know. Like if you make the radius bigger but you don't get more light distribution, then the light basically reached its maximum brightness. So basically, to understand this, it's kind of like when a light has the intensity 500, it can only travel for a several amount of units. And if your like attenuation radius is like smaller, then it cuts off the light. So you basically can clamp the influence radius. But at a certain point, the influence radius gets bigger and bigger, but the light is not intense enough, so you will never reach the full potential. So you have to basically just always see the relationship between the radius of your light and the intensity. And when you make the radius bigger and nothing happens, then you need more intensity to fill that huge radius. So that's always like the balance act that you have to do. So yeah, I think we're getting better here. So yeah, this shot actually looks pretty good right now, I would say. So yeah, that is how I do my color grading. As I said in the beginning, you can also use Lightroom. I'm not very used to Lightroom. I used it a couple of times. It has some really good functionalities, especially if you want to do some more crazy grading stuff. I would say you can achieve it quicker in Lightroom. So Lightroom, for example, has some easy tools for split toning if you want to go that route. But overall, I would say it doesn't really matter. It's just like whatever you prefer. But in the end, I really have to say that it would be very, very, very awesome to get a grading workflow that is industry standard in terms of, like now we got the ACES tone mapper, which comes from the movie industry. So please let us get cube files so we can also work with industry standard tools for color grading. And it will be more and more important, especially when we come to HDR rendering and when we have like the linear sRGB conversations and you actually want to do the grading in linear space and things like that. So it's yeah, I think it would be beneficial in the future to look into those tools and just update them to the new ways of standards that we're having. So yeah, that's just on a side note. But so yeah, I think we've been able to wrap that scene up quite nicely. And yeah, if you got any questions, just shoot. I will make a light mask session with the daylight setting, and after we're done with that stuff, I'm open again to new submissions. So I already got some stuff from a couple of people via the forums. They asked me if I could look at their scenes as well. So I have to say that there can be occasions where I have to say no to a scene, and that's like, first of all, this what I'm doing here, this is not like super basic stuff, so I need a certain level of environment to work on, because if there's like tons of issues with the materials and all those things, it's like kind of like basic things, then it's slightly hard for me to really do anything, because then I basically have to rebuild all the shaders from the scratch and just show how you build stuff properly. And that's what this is not really about. So I need a certain level of quality and complexity to actually work through it. So please just bear that in mind when you send me stuff. And I also got one request from one guy to look at his stuff, and he's building something for VR. I don't know yet if I can look at that, because VR works slightly different. I can't even test it. So the thing is, of course I can make that scene look kick-ass, but then it might not run anymore in VR. And the thing is, I don't have any tools here to check that out. So like I can't test the performance, I can't test if there's visual glitches because of things that we did. So it's really hard. So I'm just trying to tell you that there might be scenes or situations where I have to say like I can't really work with that the way this is supposed to be right now from my side. But that might change over the course of time. So yeah, long story short, thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something and you had a good time. And I'll try to wrap up the next part in the coming week. And we're going to look at the daylight setting for this scene and static lighting together with vegetation and so on. All right. Have a great time, guys. Thanks a lot and cheers.